Hey, so I wanted to discuss a few points of saddle fit. We have not yet had a chance to discuss overall like the 27-point saddle fitting routine or something like that, but I'd really like to make a video on that soon when I've got a chance to video with a live horse so that we can, chalk line and draw that all out. But I wanted to point out a few things that I've come across a lot recently. So we'll discuss Western saddles in a little more detail, but the overall rules go both ways. A horse is a horse, and they have pressure sensitive areas and they have areas that are weight bearing. So that's the same no matter what saddle you're in, but most of my saddles are English, and I kind of prefer it just for the lightweight, the simplicity, the comfort, the maneuverability. I just really like English. I'm just a nerd like that. So here is my Corvette. I'm actually selling this saddle if you want one. It's great. It just doesn't fit my horse quite the way that it should, since she keeps growing, and as youngsters do, every 6 months or so it's like, well, now my saddle doesn't fit. But this one's been great for a couple years. Couple pointers just to get us going. We've got basic parts. These are the pommel and the cantle. This is the seat. So all saddles, whether English or Western, are going to have a pommel, it's the front, a seat, and a cantle. So these are your most important parts when it comes to your fit and your comfort. When it comes to your horse, really big, important features are what's called the gullet. So this opening in the front, the throat of the saddle, is called the gullet. And the gullet on an English saddle, yet another reason why I love them, is the gullet extends all the way down. It's got a very clear channel. This is for the horse's spine. So if I hold this, you can see, get it right there. Here we go. You can see there's a clear channel all the way through the length of the saddle. Your horse's spine should be able to fit comfortably within that channel without making contact with anything at all. Part of the things that kind of confuses me a little about Western saddles is they have a nice opening here in the front of the gullet. And if your horn's here, you've got usually a little wider gullet or opening. But then they kind of, in the trees, they just kind of taper down to the back end. And I just really don't love that. Depending on what saddle pad you use, your saddle pad may have a little bit of a gullet channel built in. But the design of an English saddle specifically is they were not always intended to need saddle pads. And really, even with the modern saddles, you don't need saddle pads. It's just not necessary. It does help keep your saddle cleaner, so I will give you that. But you see these saddles, inside of course is the tree, the wood frame, which makes it rigid, so you can't twist or bend the saddle. The whole point of the tree is to give you stability and rigidity so that your weight is distributed evenly across the saddle. So when you're looking to fit a saddle, the biggest probably two things I would tell you to be looking for is A, no pressure on the spine, whether English or Western, no contact with the spine whatsoever. But two is that there's as even as possible, as consistent as possible, pressure or weight distribution throughout the length of the saddle tree. So the English saddle tree on the bottom is covered by these panels. Now this is a foam flocked panel. It's got foam layers, usually kind of a composite of multiple thickness and densities, but it's got a squishy, relatively soft foam panel inside of these leather tubes. So these panels are what bear the weight of the saddle. When you set on your horse, it should only be making contact throughout these panels from back to front. So these, again, are soft. They pad the tree. And if it fits the shape of the saddle fits your horse properly, then you actually don't need to add any padding to protect your horse's back. This should do all the shock absorbing. This should do all of the cushion. The reason we usually do use a saddle pad is just to keep your saddle clean, to help wick away moisture, might improve grip. This leather can get slick when it gets sweaty. But the original English saddles, they were ridden for centuries with no pads or very minimal padding. Maybe just enough to, again, make your saddle easy to clean so you don't have to wipe the sweat off in the mud every time you ride your horse and they get filthy on a fox hunt. But these saddles are very squishy, very comfy. I'll point out a few things though that you need to look out for with your English saddles especially. So neither of these is too awful bad. I don't love the panels on this saddle. A little bit hard to see maybe from a distance. We might have to get a little closer. But they're, again, foam flocked. You can tell that by the way that they're sewn onto the saddle. There's not much space between the back edge of the saddle and the panel. Same thing if you look up under the skirts. It's sewn directly on. They're a little harder, so they don't mold to the horse at all. A wool flock saddle, we'll discuss in a minute, but it's made to mold or conform to your horse over time, as well as being able to be adjusted or reflocked. But these foam panels are the shape that they are now is the shape they're going to always be. The shape they make them at the factory, you can't modify it. So if the saddle doesn't fit, straight off the production line, it's not going to fit, period. So that's a little inconvenient. But the reason it doesn't fit my horse is those panels are quite round. They're quite tubular. And the bottom edge that makes contact with my horse is a little too steep. It's kind of triangular. The horse's back would need to be kind of a thoroughbred's back, kind of a steep, starting at the spine, sloping down quickly. My horse has a very flat quarter horsey back, so she pretty much gets all the weight on this outside edge on both sides. So this is not an ideal panel shape in the rear end for her. The front end though fits her pretty nicely. The angle is good for her shoulder, for the back of her shoulder, and it's got enough width to clear her spine on either side. So I don't hate this saddle on her. It's just not ideal. It tends to want to shift because there's too much direct pressure here rather than evenly distributed across the width of her back. So point number 2 on this saddle, check your saddles please for width between the gullets, all here. Most saddles will tend to start out very, very wide in the front, and I've had a few that started out where you could put maybe 4, 5 fingers side by side like this, but as you tapered back, it gets tight. This one's not too bad through the middle. It's not bad until right about here. I can still fit 3 fingers in the back, which isn't horrible, but if your horse has a particularly wide spine, you'll have to have a wider channel. In general, a wider channel is probably going to be better for the majority of horses. I've had a few actually that were given to me for free that started out 4 or 5 fingers up here, and then by here I could only fit 2, and throughout the rest of the saddle it just tapered tighter and tighter. So that's going to pinch your horse's spine and press on the spinal processes, so it's not going to be comfortable for them. So this one's doable, it's tolerable for my horse, but I would rather show you what I am working with now. I am not affiliated with Wintec in any way, but I just happen to have a dressage saddle of my own. This is one I'm borrowing to try. This is the Wintec 500 jump saddle. I love it, I think it's great. But what Wintec has done really nicely on this model of saddle, they have widened these panels up, both in the width of each panel itself, so you're getting more weight distribution, a little bit lower PSI, and they've also widened the gullet. So this is pretty nice width all the way from front. It's deep too. There's a lot of spinal clearance. There's several inches there. You've got a whole hand from front all the way to back. I can still fit 4 whole fingers. So this has plenty of width to allow my horse's spine to fit in even when she's on a bend where her saddle might want to shift a little bit to one side and her spine needs to bend. There's plenty of room in there. So it's not going to pinch her spine. Now, like I said, that saddle that I showed you before is a foam panel saddle. So it's a little stiffer and there's no modifying it. This is a wool flocked saddle. I don't know if you can see how squishy this is. My dressage saddle is actually air flocked. It's got some foam and some air. I haven't got a whole lot to say about that yet because I'm new to it, but the wool flocked is the original saddle design because it's soft with heat and use, aka pressure, it will conform to some degree to your horse's back. So the theory is, as long as the tree itself fits the contours of your horse's back, the wool will also just help fine tune that fit. And if you have like a little bit of a fit issue, just like a minor one, you can move the wool, or have a saddler do it preferably, move the wool to fill in the gaps and help even out that pressure. So I really like this feel. It's super squishy, super soft. As far as the gullet goes, I don't know if you can tell, there's a whole different shape to these panels. The width is much wider in the gullet, so there's plenty of spinal clearance, but these panels are flatter and wider. So they give you a lot more width to spread your weight out on. Your horse has only a certain weight distribution area, and it's not on the spine, and you also can't put a ton of weight on the ribs. So it's important to make sure that each saddle fits your horse. Don't just buy the widest, flattest saddle you can get for your small horse. That could cause a problem too. But for my average horse, this nice wide, flatter angle, remember her back is not steep and upright like a lot of thoroughbreds. She has a flat tabletop on the rear end, quarter horsey back, and this makes better contact with her entire back area just throughout, and it's so soft, so it gives what little bit of angular difference there may be. It does give to her, and it's got a lot of depth to it. So that fits my horse a lot better. So again, since my focus here is gullets and panels, you need lots of width in the gullet to make sure you clear the horse's spine all the way through the length of the saddle. You want to make sure that the angles of not only the front of the saddle, which most people are familiar with, but the back of the saddle needs to mirror your horse's back shape as well. And your materials are important, because if your materials are not malleable or changeable, then it's going to have to fit straight out the box. There's nothing you can do about it. If you get a Wolflock saddle, and if you can find a saddler, then you can modify this to fit your horse a little bit more. If it just needs a tweak here and there, or every 6 months your horse's shape changes, you can adjust this all throughout the panel to just help keep your horse comfortable and avoid pressure spots. So I hope that helps. We'll talk more about saddle fit on another day.